And it's sort of like pulling the veil off of the whole process, because as a reader, I would have loved to have had those interactions with an author that I really enjoy.
I've seen so many people leave the industry because they tried to contort themselves and then they hated it. The very best way to build an author brand and a promise to the reader is just by
Joanna, what you said about this being the time, the era where you can just really do what you love, I resonate with that so much, because the second edition of this book, it's everything I wanted to do in the first edition, but felt so pressured to get to market.
It's one of the most divisive issues in self-publish or just publishing in general. And it's hard to ignore. Pandora's box has been opened, right? There's no putting it back. Hey folks, welcome to the BookFunnel podcast, where indie authors get real-world advice on writing, publishing, and growing a career on their own terms. Whether you're just starting out or you're deep into your author journey, we're here to help you build your readership, boost your book sales, and connect with your audience. Each episode, we aim to bring you insights from authors, experts, and industry insiders who have been there, done that, and then some. My name is Jack. I am our lead author support specialist here at BookFunnel. And I am joined today, as always, by my co-hosts, Emma Allison and Kelly Tansey.
Hello.
And our guest for this episode of the podcast is Joanna Penn. Joanna, I want to welcome you to the BookFunnel podcast.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Those in our audience who might not be familiar with you, might not know who you are, give us a brief introduction.
Yeah, sure. So I write under Joanna Penn and JF Penn, and I have the Creative Penn podcast and also Books and Travel podcast. So yeah, I write books across thriller, dark fantasy, crime, horror, travel memoir, and nonfiction for writers. I've basically just been sharing my journey. And as we record this in 2025, I've been writing for 20 years. So I've been feeling a little, I mean, talk about on your own terms, but yeah, I started in 2005, started my site in 2008. I went full time in 2011. So yeah, I've been doing this a while now and really started at the beginning of the sort of indie author revolution.
Right, exactly. The golden era, as it's often referred to. I know I got into, I've been writing for some time, like since I was a teenager, I've been writing, but I actually got into indie publishing around like 2010, 2012. So a little bit after you there. Emma, I think you are, is that about the time that you got started indie publishing? I'm trying to remember.
2009, yep.
Yep. Yeah, I knew you were a little bit before me.
My villain origin story. Yeah.
Yes. And then Kelly is the baby.
I'm the
author
baby
of the crew.
Yeah, it's about 4 or 5 years now. So, yeah.
Well, I'm sure there's people listening who haven't even started, and we should say it's always a good time to start. So it certainly doesn't matter. And in fact, back in so-called golden era, it was so hard because we didn't have the tools. I remember meeting Damon Courtney before he was Damon Courtney, and he realized that one of the needs in the industry and then built it, obviously. But, back in the day, we had practically nothing. I mean, now we can do pretty much every single thing that a traditional publisher can do. I remember when non-US authors couldn't publish on Kindle. Mm-hmm. I mean, it used to be like that. So, so definitely don't think, but don't think the past was any kind of golden era. I think every year things get better for authors. There are more opportunities, more tools, more technology, more, so definitely now is the golden time.
Right. I think that's absolutely true. It gets referred to as the golden era, I think in part because
only by some people.
Right. For those who were maybe a little bit ahead of their time and kind of knew what they were doing, there were some aspects of it that were different. Like the landscape was different. You could put your books up on Kindle and you wouldn't necessarily have to advertise them. And that's kind of changed. Now, like advertising is absolutely necessary. And so there's some aspects of the landscape that have changed, but whether or not that's good or bad, I guess, is kind of subjective.
Yeah. Because and there's always pros and cons of technological change. For sure.
Exactly. But, it's funny. I've known Damon for pre-BookFunnel. I've known Damon. I can remember him telling me like the origin. I was there when he's explaining this whole thing to me. I'm like, okay, that sounds like an idea. I don't know. At the time, I hadn't even frame of reference for that. And now here I am on the podcast for his company that he made. Yeah, it's just a bizarre turn of events. But as we traditionally do here in the beginning, we kind of check in with everybody. We're all authors here, of course, to kind of just see what everybody's currently working on. We don't usually like to pick on the guest first, but Joanna, if you'd like to share some of the projects you're currently working on first, you're more than welcome to.
Yes, well, I even have a prop because I hand edit, and this is a short story.
That's hardcore.
And I actually even just changed the title of it this morning when I was editing it. So I hand edit everything, I print it out, and it's all scribbles and lots of marks. And so this is a short story for my first short story collection. So again, this is another thing. Over the years, we all do different things. And I've written short stories for many years, but this will be my first collection. So the challenge of kind of shaping that, writing exclusive stories for it, that is my project right now. And again, we should say your definition of success is so important. Obviously, a short story collection is not really a knock it out the park, make loads of money product, but it will be my next Kickstarter, and it will be a beautiful edition with foil and sprayed edges and everything, and I will be selling it direct. So these are the things we can do now. We can do these creative projects that may not necessarily like hit the top of the charts, but they're what we really want to do. So that's what I'm working on.
Right. No, Kevin J. Anderson, we had him on the podcast a little while back, and he had a short story collection that he launched on Kickstarter.
His was a collection of collections.
Right. It was unto itself. But he didn't, I remember from that conversation with him, it was something that he kind of didn't expect to go off, and his fans ate it up and devoured it. So yeah, you never know as the author what exactly is going to be your biggest hit, and what's going to, what people are, there might be something that you're like, oh, this book, this idea that I have, that's what everybody's going to love, right? And then you put it out there, and maybe not. You never know. So absolutely. As for myself, I am. I think it's been a hot minute since I've given much of an update. Still in the middle of some rewrites. I have some issues in my military sci-fi series. At least I consider them to be issues that I want to go back and I want to iron a few things out in the first trilogy in my series. So I'm in the middle of that wonderful exercise that I know a lot of people are going to give me flack for, but I feel it's necessary, and I'm actually enjoying it. So it's been fun so far, kind of reimagining a few aspects of my characters and things like that. I'm also at a point now where I am strongly considering making the switch to direct sales, after having some conversations with some other authors. And you would think, like, you're the dude who works for BookFunnel. Of course you're going to do direct sales. Like, why wouldn't you? Why haven't you been doing it already? But I just feel like it's about time I kind of take hold of my own destiny, if you will, to use that kind of language. But so that's where I've been. Nothing flashy right now, but that's what I've been working on. Emma, you're quiet over there in the corner.
For once.
And Joanna, we do rib each other a little bit during this segment. So if we're teasing each other, it just is what it is. It's our dynamic.
Oh,
Floor
it's
is
my
yours,
turn.
Emma.
Okay.
Yeah, it's your turn.
Well, I am ecstatic and discombobulated to report that I officially unpublished the first edition of Night in His Eyes, which was 54,000 words. So the second edition is now 113,000 words and counting. It's the difference between a Hershey bar. I mean, I love the first edition, but now I feel like it's just decadent, rich, dark chocolate. And Joanna, what you said about this being the time, the era where you could just really do what you love, I resonate with that so much, because the second edition of this book, it's everything I wanted to do in the first edition, but felt so pressured to get to market. Of course, now, blessed by BookFunnel, I don't have quite as much pressure, just the internal pressure. So I'm just loving the experience of writing this.
When was the first edition out?
2022, I think, ish. Yeah. I remember rage writing during COVID and Me Too and things like that. Which is interesting, rereading it. I'm like, oh, I see where that came from.
Well, COVID in particular was an interesting time for a lot of folks, because a lot of writers probably born out of that, even people that might have never considered okay, I want to write a novel, but I don't have the time. And then for a lot of people, they suddenly had the time. I don't think that was your situation, Emma, if I know your history correct, but I don't think you're alone in that regard. That was an interesting time for everybody. And hey, writing a novel is a great way to cope. with some of that stuff is what I'd. So if somebody out there is seeing this and you're like, you got a lot of time on your hands and you need something to write it up, try writing a novel. Kelly, what about you? What have you been working on lately?
Well, my contemporary romance that I'm doing in the shared world. So about 15 authors are contributing. They have started to go out to ARC readers. So it's going to keep going until September is every week. There'll be a different one that's released, and mine is coming out in August. And I'm almost done. I see the light at the end of the tunnel. I've been getting so many words in the evenings, especially. It's been my quiet time to write, and I'm almost there.
Yeah, I envy you.
Then it's going to be the editing, because the editing is it's a pretty ugly draft, so it's going to be a little bit to edit it, but I'm hopeful.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. No, I envy you. Yesterday we were talking because we have kids at different ages, and I have little ones. And Kelly, most of yours are grown up at this point.
Yeah,
right?
My youngest is 13.
And so I remember last night, it just was like, by 8 p.m., the kids were going to bed. We kind of hand off, my wife and I. And so it was the handoff from me to mom for bedtime. And I was like, okay, I could stay up for 3 hours, but I'm just beat. They take it out of me.
Yeah, I get it.
Anyway, it's just one of those phases. Becca Simons even mentioned something like that before. Like, you go through these phases, and for some authors, it's like, yeah, you got young kids, things like that. And it's hard, whatever that phase might be. Maybe it's that, maybe it's something else, but you go through a phase where you just got a lot going on, and writing is not always easy, and you got to give yourself a little bit of grace. And I did not think I would find myself there, but I kind of am at this moment. Anyway, though, to get to our main topic for today, and the reason why we have Joanna Penn here, we want to talk, Joanna, about author branding and kind of this larger conversation that we've noticed here at BookFunnel keeps coming up, and is coming up in a lot of different contexts lately, which is just that, like, on the one hand, like, how do you use your author brand to, like, stand out, connect with readers as the publishing industry changes? And we've kind of touched on already some of these changes, right? We referred back to, like, the golden era, so to speak, that quotes, I'll put air quotes around that, right? But obviously change is constantly happening. It is the only constant. And so around that idea, like author branding, how do you brand yourself to stand out? That's kind of the conversation we want to have here. And so first, maybe to kind of ask you, because you're an author as well, what are some things that you're doing now that maybe 10 years ago, you maybe wouldn't have considered doing in this area of branding and trying to reach readers?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a huge topic, but I want to also encourage people, because when I started, I just published everything under Joanna Penn. So I think this is really important, because I think there's so much obsession in, what Emma just said about doing it fast, getting things to market, that a lot of the time people backtrack and change things later. And that's completely fine. Like what Emma just did with that second edition. I've done loads of editions, but one of the biggest things I did with branding, so 2008, I self-published my first book. 2012, I split my names. So I put my first 3 novels out under Joanna Penn. And then 2 things happened. So one is I got a review from a reader that said, "I can't believe a woman wrote this." Yeah, ladies. And it's my action adventure thriller novel, Stone of Fire, which is kind of Dan Brownie. And, it's not graphic violence, but it has fight scenes and stuff like that. Action adventure violence, like A-Team, James Bond style. And they were like, and I was like, I don't want my gender to be the thing that is the first thing on a reader's mind. And sorry, dudes, but some dudes do judge a book by its author name. And a lot of men who write romance also use initials. So many authors use initials. Yeah. So I split my brand and my name. So JF Penn is where I write my fiction, so my crime, my thrillers, and also now my travel memoir. So you asked specifically what I've done recently, but I think this does go back. So I realized I needed to split my brand because they're very different promises. So as Joanna Penn, and you're primarily interviewing Joanna Penn here, Joanna Penn is a sort of commentator on the publishing industry, helps authors authors, that kind of thing. JF Penn, it just writes a lot of dark fiction. My travel memoir, Pilgrimage, is pretty dark. I'm doing a book on Gothic cathedrals. That's one of my next projects. So non-fiction around the things I'm interested in. And all of this comes to the basics of brand, which is your promise to the reader. And I realized back in 2012 that my promise to the reader was different. As Joanna Penn, I serve different people than JF Penn. And I have felt sometimes over the years that I need even more pen names. And there's authors out there who have a ton of pen names. But the other thing with a pen name is, so I have 2 lists. In fact, I have 2 BookFunnel accounts because I have 2 Shopify stores, one for each, and you have to therefore connect the different names in. You have different email list services. You have different everything, different signups, different social media. It is painful to have 2 whole completely different brands. So there's just a bit of a tip to people. If you are thinking about other author names, what is your goal with them? If you're going to publish wide, if you're going to sell direct, if you're going to be active on socials, you do have to do a lot more than, say, an author who just says, oh, well, I'm just going to do kind of a pen name on KU and I don't need all that other stuff going on. So those are just, I guess, some things to think about. But in terms of stretching the bounds of a brand, obviously covers can really help with that. My travel memoir, Pilgrimage, looks very different to like my action adventure, for example, or my horror. So there's lots of ways you can expand within a brand. But again, circling back to what I said at the beginning, you don't have to know all of this at the beginning. You can change over time. You can rebrand, recover, change your author name. You can do that kind of thing.
Right. And your JF Penn pen name is where you write a lot of your fiction. And I imagine those readers, some authors, for example, if they were writing even in a different genre or sometimes even a different subgenre, would come up with a new pen name. But you've got a few different genres under that JF Penn name. And I assume that your readers know, like if maybe they picked up one of your thrillers, they know some of the other stuff that you're writing under that pen name as well. You don't really keep that a secret, or do you try to still keep those compartmentalized even under that same pen name?
No, I think we can get a bit obsessed around trying to split readers. Again, I'm wide, always been wide. Actually, I do have some books in KU now, but mostly very wide. And the fact is that readers choose what they want to read. I don't need to try and convince someone they're either going to like it or they're not. What I have found, I think this is an unfortunate truth of our industry, is that some readers will not cross genre even from the same author. So some of them will, but many of them won't. So people who love, say, my action adventure series, my arcane thrillers, won't necessarily try the Matt Walker dark fantasy because it's got magic in, for example. So they're like, well, I don't like magic. Or, I do write some horror, and some of them be like, oh, I don't want to read your horror, but I might read your pilgrimage memoir. So I think the point is you can offer things to people. What I do try not to do is mix Joanna Penn and JF Penn. So it's very much like, if non-fiction for authors, that's Joanna Penn. And that does become difficult. And again, this is my name. Also is my name. It's not a pen name as such. Penn is my given name.
Right.
But I don't have any other secret names. I've never kept any secrets.
Right. For some authors in certain genres, it does make a little bit of sense. And I know one thing, like if you're already a public persona under your given name and you don't want that to be associated with the fiction you're writing, right? That's one of the most common ones. Like you're a well-known doctor or prestigious in something and you're writing, who knows what type of fiction you're writing. And maybe you just don't want those two to be associated.
Yeah, for sure. I know lots of doctors who do that. Also, if you write erotica and anything else, a lot of people will keep their erotica name separate, especially erotica and children's. Like, don't mix them.
Yeah, no, and that's absolutely absolute. So there are times where it's necessary, but yeah, that's interesting that those readers you have the potential for them to cross over a little bit, but they're still gonna, even though they enjoy this one aspect of what you have to offer, they're not necessarily gonna jump over and sample everything, but you still get a little bit of the benefit of that, I guess. Even if they're not going to read your horror, maybe there is something else that they might be interested in.
And this is a very self-serving question, but what is part one? What is a reader promise? And part two, as you mature as an author, how do you bring your audience along with you if that reader promise starts to shift because maybe you're more deliberate about it, you're more aware of it, etc.?
Great question. Have you heard of Jennifer Lynn Barnes and her id list?
I have.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I heard her speak at NINC a few years ago. She still, I believe, doesn't have an actual book on this, but she writes a lot of fiction and she's a professor or something. She's very good. Anyway, her id list, if people look it up, Jennifer Lynn Barnes' id list, or maybe you can have her on the podcast. But she basically says, so your id list are all the things that you love. So there, for me, crypts, body parts, your holy relics. And when I say body parts, I mean relics, usually religious relics, European architecture, death culture, all of this kind of stuff. Thunderstorms, there's like thunderstorms in every single piece of my fiction. So those strong women, these kind of things are what mark my brand out. But I didn't sit there and make that list and then write stuff. It kind of relates to author voice. It will come out in everything you write. And what Jennifer said that really kind of set me free from this, she's like, yeah, you can put it in every book. I feel like there's a point where we're like, oh, I've done that before. I've said that before. But actually, that's just part of your author voice. So I think that also comes into the maturity aspect, because the reality is, as you move into different subgenres and different types of books, like my midlife, menopause pilgrimage memoir, and you ladies will eventually reach that point in your life.
Yeah,
that
we're there.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I didn't need to bring people along with me because they've been with me for 15 years, 20 years. Some of my list have been with me since 2008 when I started my list. It's kind of crazy. I've been listening to my podcast since 2009. And so as you change, some people stay, some people go. And I've always focused on attraction marketing rather than push marketing. So, and I don't write to market. I'm not the ideal person to be kind of asking about these sort of questions. I'm an intuitive writer. Becca Syme's book, Writer, Are You Intuitive? Another excellent book that will really help people who feel like they don't want to write to market. They don't want to brand to market. They don't want to contort themselves into something else. And I mean, the reality is, over the last 20 years, I've seen so many people leave the industry because they tried to contort themselves and then they hated it and they couldn't sustain a career. So I think the very best way to build an author brand and a promise to the reader is just by being you and attracting the people who resonate with your message, and that will keep coming out. And then look, I get emails sometimes, like someone emailed me the other day, they're like, oh, I stopped writing in like 2015 and stopped listening to you, and now I've come back and here you are. And it's like, yeah, I'm still here. And I'm still here, I think, because I write intuitively, I market intuitively, I just put out stuff that I'm interested in. And then if people are interested too, then they might buy the book. I mean, talk about like my Gothic Cathedral book, which will be partly photos, partly essays on why I love Gothic architecture. Again, not exactly a market for that, but I feel like it will attract a certain group of people and will resonate with a lot of my work because my fiction has some of these places in. So I hope that encourages you, Emma, because then you can just be you, concentrate on being you, and you're just going to attract people over time.
I'm an intuitive island, Joanna, and you're speaking my language.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. And I actually loved how you said earlier about, your job is taking the pressure off, because this is another tip. A lot of people who put the pressure on the books must be the only thing making the money can force themselves into certain timeframes for writing or certain subgenres that are trendy. And there's nothing wrong with either way, but it feels like there's been too much emphasis on the do it full time. And just to be clear, I have always had multiple streams of income. For me, the podcast, speaking, consulting, training is another stream of income. So I hope that encourages you to kind of really lean into who you are. It sounds like you've done that with this latest edition of your book there, the dark chocolate one. What was the name of that again?
It is Night in His Eyes, and it was intended as a fantasy romance, but the shift was to epic fantasy women's fiction with a romantic subplot. And it took me a while to realize that's why I'm off market, because it's not the same thing.
But maybe that's your market.
Yes,
maybe it's your
my
market.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing. I also write cross-genre, and it is absolutely not the way to a kind of multi-seven-figure business.
Mm-hmm.
But what it is the way to is a happy, creative life where you can make sustainable money and you're happy. So, I mean, hell yeah.
Yeah, which is something that you can do now. And I guess to tie this back to our mention of like the golden era,
Well, can we just be clear? I never said that. Do not quote me as ever saying that.
But what I'm trying to say here is that you can now, I guess, just with the way that the market has changed over the last 10, 15 years, writing to market is it's not the only option, right? Like it used to be, like if you wanted to make money as an author, you had to get picked up by a traditional publisher. Self-publishing comes out. Now we have more flexibility. I feel like those degrees of flexibility are kind of opening up more. Like you said, if you're not writing to market, okay, you're writing in a bunch of genres. Maybe that's not the way to build a 7-figure business, but you can still have a very comfortable full-time living off of that type of writing.
Or you can just be really happy and have a side hustle.
Exactly. Or whatever that looks like for somebody.
Yeah, I think sometimes we need to remember that most people write because they love writing. Mm-hmm. And this 99% of authors and writers in the world are not writing for money. It really is love first. And so we need to get back to that in the industry, I feel, because there's loads of ways to make money that are easier than writing books. And yes, I do make money from books, but I also make money from other things. But I think it's so important to keep coming back to, why am I doing this? What is the point? And mostly the point is because we have something burning inside us. In fact, the short story that I just waved around, the seed of that story is from 25 years ago when I was in the Poor Knights Islands of New Zealand, and something happened when I was out there, and I haven't written about it ever. 25 years. And that short story has taken that much time. And who knows? But I wrote that short story for me. Sure, it's going in a collection, but who cares? I wrote it for me. And that is why we do this. And I don't want to negate the money side at all, but that is often the big focus of our community. Whereas I think coming back to the love of it and why we do this and why we want to keep writing and why we have something deeply human within us to share. This double down on being human is my obsession in an age of AI. And sure, I use AI. I'm doing a webinar on AI this weekend. I love it, but it's not doing my finished words. It's not doing what matters to me. So I think that this humanity and this love of what you're doing, this is why we do it.
One of the things that I was thinking about when we were talking about this is the authenticity gets lost of an author, because we've been like kind of thinking about in the age of AI, in the age of all of the stuff that people are really concerned about, like I'm going to get replaced. And we've been talking about how to bring authenticity to how authors are putting themselves out there. And I think maybe with, this conversation of writing to market, if that's where you are, okay, but maybe writing what you love is more authentic and it's going to come through. I know there was a while, this was a few years ago, where it was, find a genre that you're kind of okay with that makes a lot of money and then write in that and then, put out a book and and then crank them out, because that was that was selling. They were selling and you were making the money, and that's okay. Like, again, everybody has their own journey. But I do wonder, with the turn of AI and where it's going in the kind of the concerns that people have, do you think the authenticity of writing what you love will help with that, or will give you a better brand that you can use?
Yeah, well, I think for those of us who have always written in an authentic manner and have never done that, it feels like a much better time. And in fact, even the way Google search is changing and the way that Amazon algorithms will have to change is that we're going to be in the long, 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 long tail in the future. So the more weird you are, the more your work is personalized, the less mainstream I think it is, the more likely you might, and it goes back to Kevin Kelly's 1,000 True Fans, which was 20 years old, 2006, I think it was, where you attract a smaller group of people, but they really like your work. And that's why many of us have moved into the kind of Kickstarter model, where we can offer more higher quality books to our fans. So my average order value for my last Kickstarter, which was Death Valley, somewhere behind me, that was £45 and $60. So an average order value of $60. You cannot get that on Amazon, right. So if you can offer different things, beautiful things you really care about. I also have always written an author's note, but I think an author's note is more important than ever. And in fact, the short story that I mentioned again, I started by writing the author's note. which was where the story comes from. And so I think this is going to be important. I rebooted my books and travel podcast because JF Penn, I feel, needs a voice. So Joanna Penn has a voice in the Creative Penn podcast, but and I've pulled away a lot from social media, mainly because there's so many bots on it and there's so much AI generated content. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. So, I mean, this podcast, for example, is great because the three of you are come every week and you do this and people get to know you. And that's part of it. They can see your human. I mean, you can do video avatars, but this would be a lot of work, right? Super lot of work. So this is really us. And I think, so now I'm using like Instagram as proof of humanity, as opposed to marketing. So I'm really, this is my cat and this is me on the canal and, life stuff, my edits, my hand edits, this kind of thing. So some people don't think this is important, and there will always be people who can write fast to market and do their work, which they need to get paid, which is fine. But I think, again, if you want a longer term, happy career, focusing on what you want to create first and then attracting people who might want that, I think and offering it to them, like, I made this, would you like it? I think is a nice way to do, and so it just feels nicer, to be fair.
Right. Another data point that we've seen here at BookFunnel and with some of the guests we've had on too is more and more authors doing like in-person events as well. And I think that, not that we have to go all the way down that bunny trail, but it's another data point along the lines of like proof of humanity, right? Like, I'm here with you in the flesh, and you can ask me about the book, and you probably never heard of me, but like, I'm here, and so I think that's just another indicator that, with, again, whatever anybody's opinion is on some of the AI content, like you mentioned, even on social media, it's kind of starting to maybe drown some people out in some respects. I think we'll adapt to it, but you have to find a way to, again, just stand out in that. And this has happened in other ways before. I
don't like the words to stand out, because we cannot beat the machines.
No, yeah.
We literally can't. And also, I think standing out kind of implies that you want to somehow be above other people or separate. But actually, it's, again, just like about being you. And you mentioned there about being in person. So if we walk into an author convention, for example, and you start talking to the person next to you, are you interested in that person or not? If you're not, walk away. Go talk to somebody else. And I feel like that's it. So it's not necessarily that we're standing out. It's just we're different. And we're attracting people because we are different. My kind of weird is death culture and pilgrimage and, really kind of strange things around that. And every week people send me pictures from cemeteries all over the world, and I share it on my podcast. And that's weird. But people will email me and say, I drove past a cemetery and thought of you. And I think that is blooming awesome. Like that. Some people think that's weird, but I am actually Wednesday from the Addams Family. And, she's super popular. You never know. But I think that's the important thing. It's like, I don't have to force myself to stand out. I just be me.
Right. And I think that's what I'm trying to say. Maybe when I say stand out, that's actually kind of what I'm thinking, is not to like rise above or rise to the surface, but to be different. And so that when people are, if they're on social media or wherever it is that they find you, whatever that context is, being yourself is how you actually attract their attention, which I think is what you're trying to say. So, I think maybe we're using, when I say stand out, I guess maybe we have a different idea of what that means. But yes, that's exactly what I'm thinking. And I think that's funny that now whenever I drive by a cemetery, I will be thinking of you.
Well, I was kind of thinking along the lines of the kind of posts that you were talking about as having like, here's my cat, or here's the edits that I've done. And a few times that I've gone on TikTok and I did a video where I showed in big bold letters all the random things I write in my drafts. And it was so popular. And it's that authenticity of being like, look at this crazy stuff I put in my drafts. And it's sort of like pulling the veil off of the whole process, because as a reader, I would have loved to have had those interactions with an author that I really enjoyed. Like, what does their writing process really look like? And how many cups of coffee do they have on their desk, or water cans or whatever? And it's sort of that pulling off the veil that is bringing that authenticity that will, I think, attract those people that would enjoy your books and your content.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you do need some, I guess, some courage to do that. So just back on the death culture thing, for probably 8 years, I struggled to share that kind of thing because I always still have fear of judgment, fear of people thinking that I'm strange. And then my husband would just be like, you are strange. So, people will judge you. What is lovely in the author community is we are all pretty weird. I mean, everyone is a special kind of person in our community, which is cool because you can always find other people to talk to, and they don't think you're necessarily strange compared to other people. So I think that's really important, is to the self-censorship aspect. If you're feeling like, oh, I can't possibly share that, sometimes obviously there is a line, like it might be your kids. You might not share your kids' faces, or there's safety things you're not going to share, but things that will resonate with other people, like the cemetery thing or other cats. I saw your cat there, Kelly, going past. I'm a cat person. My cat is here. So I think these are the things that can bring people, they're just something in common, something human in common. But yeah, if people are like, oh, well, what if I share this and people judge me? Well, yeah, they probably will. But maybe that's also something you're going to bring into your writing. Coming back to Jennifer Limbarn's id list, maybe it's one of the things on your list. So if people do that exercise, I did that exercise during one of her seminars at NINC. And, some of the stuff on there, like sisters, for example, I write a lot about sisters, twins, that kind of thing. And these things come up over and over again, and they really help you. They might help, coming back to branding, they might actually help you around branding too, because branding is such the marketing word, but it really is like, what are the things that people come to you for? What do they want from you? And what can you give them that over time?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because talking about connecting with readers and id and the 1,000 true fans, the last 6-12 months, especially like the last 3 months, I've found myself turning inward a lot with my audience, like wanting to cultivate who I already have. Like, of course, you do all the cross promotion, outward, big net things to bring new people in. But I look at my list and the people I have, some who are new, some who've been with me for a while. And I'm like, why am I so focused externally when I need to cultivate the people I already have?
Yeah. And they're the ones who will back your Kickstarter, for example, rather than, and I mean, and again, coming back to business, all the love, rah, good, jolly good. But when it comes to actual money, how many people on so many of these lists actually will spend any money? And that is what it comes down to, because we do pay for our email lists. So it's like, okay, well, and those people, the people that will support you with reviews, with buying your books, with backing your Kickstarters, with, coming to your events to see you signing or to get a book signed, those are the precious ones. You're completely right. So yeah, it's like focusing in on those, and sure, keep spreading the circle, but focus on serving those who are already with you.
Right. And sometimes, because I've attempted that myself in the past, it feels like screaming into the void sometimes. And I don't know if you've gotten that same kind of, like, you'll make an effort, you'll make an attempt, and the response is not what you were hoping for, whatever it happens to be. How do you work with that when you're not getting, if you're in that situation where you're not getting a lot of that feedback from your audience? What should you, again, focusing on authenticity, what would you do in that situation?
I think it depends when it is, because, for example, the first 6 years of my podcast, practically nobody listened. So, but between 2009 and 2014, 15, when podcasting really started taking off, I literally was talking into the wind. There was nobody there. And again, writing books for many years, like I said, back in those days, it was very hard to market because we didn't have any of the ways that are available now to do any marketing. So it was very difficult. So I guess because my career has been just slow and steady for decades now, I've never necessarily had the expectations of, I don't expect a bestseller. I don't aim for that necessarily. I will launch a book I soft launch. I expect the money to come over time. I don't expect to make a ton of money on a launch. I do sustainable campaign marketing. So, it's nice to sell a few books. So I think it's, again, it's about expectations. I feel like the most disappointed people are kind of expecting a ton of response. But again, what we said at the beginning, if you're writing because you love this book and you really want to put that book out there, then it doesn't really even matter, because, so there's another one behind me there, Writing the Shadow. That book, it took a long, long time. And the seed of that is from the 90s, when I studied Jungian psychology at university. And that book, The Writing the Darker Side of Yourself, that, again, was not massively popular book. It sells small amounts every month because most people don't want to write their darker selves. So then they look at that and they go, oh, no, thank you. Don't want to do that. But I had to write that book. So I think you just have to come back to focusing on what you love, the real reasons why you're doing this, why you want to write this book. In fact, there's a great author, David Morrell. He wrote what became First Blood, the Rambo movie. He's a wonderful, wonderful man. He's at Thriller Fest. If people go to Thriller Fest, David is there. And he told me years ago, what he does is he writes a letter to himself before he starts any book. And that letter to himself explains why this is the book to write. And so, like, all the reasons, and it's got to be like 3-4 pages long, A4 pages, because he's old school. He's like in his 70s. Why this is the book he's going to spend years on, because, they call him the professor. He does deep research. And so I think that's really important. That's kind of what I was saying with the author's note as well. Why is this book important? And again, this does come down, I think, in this age of AI, when you can generate a book a day, you can generate a book every hour if you want. But I don't know why you would want to. Because it's more about, putting your soul and yourself into your work. And what's funny now is I kind of sit between the haters who hate AI and the haters who are going to hate on me for not being like ultimate AI. So We're at that wonderful point in the author community when it's fractured by this, which is why, again, we have to come back to why we keep doing it, why we write what we do. And I don't know, I want that to be a positive message for people in this time of fear and global upheaval and technological change, that we write because we are writers and we love it. So don't stop us. We are just going to keep going.
Right. No, it's one of the most divisive issues in self-publish, or just publishing in general. And it's hard to ignore, too, because it is such an advancement. It's touching multiple aspects of the industry. So even for those who are very opposed to it, it's like, well, it's there though. And you can't, Pandora's box has been opened, right? There's no putting it back, and who knows what it will look like. But I think industries have solved problems like this in various ways in the past. I think there are solutions. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how. But
again, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you use the tools, whatever you want to do. If you're writing because you love writing and you want to write a book or a short story or a poem or whatever, or a memoir, then you do it regardless. Like, it doesn't matter. And I guess I want that to be the message. Like, use the tools however you want, but please write what is on your heart.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we're going to wrap things up here for today. Joanna, I want to thank you for joining us. Before we go, anything that you want to shout out or share with the audience?
Well, here on YouTube, if you're watching the video, my YouTube channel, The Creative Pen, and I have audiobooks and the podcast. And of course, the podcast is on all the feeds. And Books and Travel is my other podcast, if people would like to check that out. And my books, as Joanna Penn and JF Penn, are in all the usual places.
Excellent. And we'll make sure to link to those in the description of this video on YouTube as well. Joanna, thank you for joining us today for the BookFunnel podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. And thank you, of course, to my co-hosts, Emma Allison and Kelly Tansey. Thank you to you, the audience. If you're watching here on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other podcast platform, please follow us there and leave a review. It really does mean a lot. We want to thank you for listening, and we will see you all in the next episode. Thank you for watching. Check out these other videos from BookFunnel. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel